Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next edition of the Mark You Down for a Cup of Joe podcast. I'm Mark.
I'm Joe.
Yeah, and today we're excited. We're excited to talk about, well, I'm just going to give you the name of the podcast, even though you're going to see it and already know what it is. It's called Houston, We Have a Problem. And this is a podcast reacting to the recent trades that the Houston Texans have made with both the Seattle Seahawks and the Miami Dolphins. So, Joe, let's get us kicked off with that first trade with the Seattle Seahawks. What happened there?
So I think a lot of us uh, were kind of following the Jadeveon Clowney story, and well, folks, he finally got shipped off. He got shipped off to Seattle for Jacob Martin, Barkevius Mingo, and a third-round pick. So Jadeveon Clowney is now playing in a Seahawks jersey.
Well, so, and did the Texans give anything else up in addition to Jadeveon, or was that just it?
No, they just gave up Jadeveon.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. Joseph, what are your initial thoughts on the haul that, the Houston Texans were able to receive in exchange for Jadeveon Clowney?
Considering who they traded, I was actually expecting them to get a little bit more out of this. Maybe a little bit of a higher pick, maybe a second round pick or a couple of third round picks instead of just the 1/3. Because this is a, 3-time Pro Bowler. He's been healthy the past few years. He's been playing really, really well. His numbers may not show up, but he's a very, very disruptive pass rusher. He's a very disruptive player. And it's a huge loss for the Texans. He's a very dynamic player. And because of that, I think they needed more of a... I think they got swindled a little, not swindled, but they are on the losing end of this trade.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I completely agree with you there that I'm going to say that the Houston Texans got swindled. I'm going to go that far with that because who was that first guy? I forget his name.
Jacob Martin.
I have no idea who that is. So that's probably not a good sign. The second thing, Barkevius Mingo, former first-round pick of the Cleveland Browns, I believe, outside linebacker, supposed to be a really good pass rusher. I know he bounced around to New England and I think Seattle. And the funny thing is, reports were coming out of Seattle that he was he's going to have a great year. And look what they do. They ship him off and then a third-round pick. I think the Houston Texans are clear losers. To me, this looked like almost a desperate move just to dump him, right before the season started because Jadeveon Clowney was starting to hold out and miss games. And this was going to cause a huge distraction for Houston, obviously. A team that has high aspirations, who thinks they can probably win the Super Bowl this year. I think it was a desperate move, and they really got the short end of the stick on this one. So I will say, though, in defense of Houston, Jadeveon Clowney had not signed his franchise tender at that point, and he only has 1 year left on his contract. He also has some chronic knee problems that could be issues later down the line. And the other thing is that the Seattle Seahawks cannot actually extend him at this point in the calendar year. So I get that maybe paying that lower price tag makes a little bit more sense, but I think I agree with you in the sense that they should have probably got a second round pick even for a 1 year rental for Jadeveon Clowney, because I think he is that talented, and you know how Pete Carroll is with his defense. I think he's going to fit right in with that 4-3, 3-4 weird hybrid, and he's going to be a disruption, and he's going to have some players around him as well. So Texans, I think they're the losers on this trade.
Yeah, I have to agree. I have to agree with you there, Mark. And for me, it seems like they were just trying to get rid of Clowney. I don't think Clowney was ever planning on re-signing with the Texans at this point. So I think this was more of a desperation move just to get rid of him and get something for him really, really fast.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think if they had waited just a little bit, teams, as the regular season starts, there's going to be some teams that need some pass rush. There's going to be some guys that go down with injuries. There's going to be guys that just aren't producing. And I feel like if they had waited just a few more weeks, they may have been able to get a little bit more for Jadeveon Clowney, maybe a higher pick, or maybe another dynamic player, maybe a offensive weapon, or another defensive player for that defense.
Yeah, normally I would agree with you on that one. The thinking I have here, though, is because Jadeveon Clowney only has that 1 year contract. You can look at this as a rental more than anything. And the later you get the trade, the less time you have to use him. So I think that almost depreciates his value a little bit. But normally I would agree with you. If he was under contract for longer, the longer gone on, they could have, had the luxury of getting a better offer. And the other thing to consider here is that Jadeveon Clowney, there were reports coming out that, Miami was one of the first teams interested in Jadeveon, but like maybe the day before he got traded, there were also reports coming out that Jadeveon was not going to play for Miami. So you had a case of this player who was handcuffing his team, basically saying, I'm never going to come play for the Texans again. And then, handcuffing the team some more, saying, I'm not going to go play for specific teams. So I think that also contributed to his lower value in that third round pick. So overall, big winners, Seattle Seahawks, big losers, Houston Texans, and Jadeveon Clowney has the potential to be a big winner. You never know, he could get a big contract if he plays well at the end of this year, especially testing the open waters of free agency. So is there anything else you would like to add with this Jadeveon Clowney, Houston, Seattle Seahawks trade?
No, I think we covered it all.
Okay, perfect. So, with that, we're going to segue back into some more Miami talk. And we're going to talk about the Miami trade with Houston. Joseph, what were the details of that blockbuster trade?
All right. So, the Texans have given up 2 firsts and a second-round pick to Miami for offensive tackle Clowney and Tunsil and wide receiver Kenny Stills. So, we see right from the back that Houston has given up a lot for Clowney Tunsil and Kenny Stills. 2 firsts and a second. Those are 3 potential dynamic playmakers right there. 3 starters potentially that they gave up right there for Clowney Tunsil and Kenny Stills. But before we attack this, I'm actually not too upset with this trade. We look at Deshaun Watson. He's a very, very young quarterback, and he just got hurt. He hasn't had the best offensive line protection. And yeah, you give up a lot, but you invest in protecting your young quarterback, because we see in the NFL, if you have those quarterbacks, if you have your franchise quarterback there, you can go places. The Packers have done it for a while. Look at the Patriots with Tom Brady, and Andrew Luck in the Colts for a while before he retired. He was carrying that team. So if you have your quarterback you're in place, then I think you need to invest a lot to protect that man and get him some time to throw and give him some weapons to throw. Kenny Stills may not be the top 10, top 15, top even 30 receiver, but he's a solid playmaker right there. Will Fuller type receiver who will be able to go down there and, catch the deep ball a little bit. So I'm actually not too upset with this trade. I think this could actually turn into a decent trade for the Texans.
Those are some really interesting points and things that I haven't really thought of, especially with the Will Fuller thing, because Will Fuller is always injured, and it's almost seemingly like, with him being injured, they're always missing this element to their offense, that vertical passing game, that burner. But if I was a Houston Texans fan, I would be so livid right now. I would be throwing darts at a picture of Bill O'Brien, and we're gonna get a little bit more into that later. But I think that price tag is too steep for a very good left tackle and an average receiver, in my mind. I think it was too steep, and the reason why is now you're basically saying that the team you have now is the team you're gonna live or die with, and you don't really have a lot of flexibility moving forward, because this move tells me a couple things, but the one thing that it tells me, and I'll get into the other thing later, but the thing that tells me is that this team thinks that they can win the Super Bowl right now, and they have the quarterback, they have the defense. Even though they don't have Jadeveon Clowney, they're going to be a good defense. They just need some weapons and offensive line. Put those things in place. And especially with like the absence of Lamar Miller, they had to get the Carlos Hyde. So, they're kind of scrambling a little bit before the season starts. But if you're locked in with this team for better or worse, if this team doesn't work out, it's an average team. If Deshaun Watson can't carry these pieces, then, you're going to end up paying Deshaun Watson a ton of money. And then you're not going to have the first round picks to supplement talent in the years to come. So you're going to almost have that Colts Andrew Luck situation where you have a great quarterback and a bad team around him. So I think you have the potential to have a train wreck in Houston. Probably not this year, but looking forward. So I'd be very worried if I was a Houston Texans fan. This smells like desperation, just like the Clowney trade. And desperation isn't the best way to run a franchise. Mm-hmm. So do you have anything else you'd want to add to that conversation?
Well, I would just kind of add kind of the point you mentioned earlier that the Texans think they can win the Super Bowl right now. I do think they have the talent there. They have the quarterback. They have the offense. They still have a solid defense there. You still have a man named J.J. Watt running out there terrorizing quarterbacks. So they're still going to be a really solid team. And if all of this works out, I think we could end up talking about how, let's say they do win the Super Bowl. Let's say they make it that far. I think at that point we'll be talking about how this may have been one of the greater moves in franchise history, two first and a second for a Super Bowl. I think most general managers, most head coaches would do that every day, maybe every day of the week, maybe twice on Tuesday.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. That is true. This whole thing will be mitigated by a Super Bowl win, but that is a tall task. You still have Tom Brady. You've still got, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. You've got the Raiders and Derek Carr, coming up. I believe in. Maybe none of you do, but I do. But yeah, my whole point with this is a very risky move, and it's a very boom or bust, and it's a really interesting trend you see in the NFL. I think the Houston Texans are almost doing what the Rams did last year. We're bringing in a bunch of free agents, getting a lot of people through trades. They paid Aaron Donald, they paid Todd Gurley, they brought in Aqib Talib, Marcus Peters, and even they had reports reportedly wanted to give up a first round pick for Khalil Mack for a 1-year rental. Like, they were going all in. So I think this is going to be a really interesting trend that might be set in the NFL, where teams are going to go all in, because you've seen in the past, especially 10-15 years ago, GMs are a lot more conservative, and they're a lot more focused on building the franchise long term, and we're almost seeing them buck the quo. It's a really interesting way that teams are approaching their business. So anyways, we're going to move on to another topic. So we're kind of wanted to digest what all these things mean in Houston a little bit more. So Joe, I'm going to open the floor to you. Just what does this mean for Bill O'Brien or the Houston Texans not having a GM? What are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, we're starting to see with just with some of these trades right here, I think we're starting to see just how Bill O'Brien is not experienced in managing a football team like this. Some of these moves, we talked about Clowney earlier, how he probably could have gotten more value. A more experienced GM may have been able to push it a little bit more. He'd know how to work the other general manager. He'd know when to make the move, when to make the trade, when to kind of push back and just say, all right, you can wait all you want. And I think just Bill O'Brien's experience right now is really costing the team just a little bit. We talked about how they probably lost on that Seahawks trade a little bit. With this Miami trade, they gave up a whole lot. They gave up a lot of their future. But like I said earlier, I still like that potential, but we're still not there. We got to ultimately see how that trade works out, to see where the Texans go this year, to really call this trade a good or bad one, in my opinion. And we're starting to see just what happens if you don't have a man up top. It all starts from the very top, from the owner to the general manager, head coach. All goes down right there. You can't have one man playing two spots.
Yeah. Well, you can't have one man playing two spots unless your name is Bill Belichick. Like, let's be real. And the interesting thing is that Bill O'Brien does come from that New England lineage, so maybe he's trying to take the approach that Bill Belichick is, being the GM and the head coach. I personally think it's too much for most people. I think Bill's one of the only guys that can get away with it, and he doesn't even do it perfectly. Like, he's missed on some draft picks. But to me, what this all means is that I think Bill O'Brien is getting desperate, and I think he's on the hot seat. Because he's had this team for a long time, and he's done a very good job, I think, with the Houston Texans, taking them from almost a laughing stock and turning them into a respectable NFL franchise. Developing Deshaun Watson is probably the best thing that he's done for that franchise. But I think all the lack of playoff success, I think the owner might be breathing down his neck a little bit. And this to me smells like a bunch of desperation, where Bill O'Brien's probably trying to save his job as opposed to doing what's best for the Houston Texans franchise. And if you're a Texans fan, that's where I would be really concerned. That's where I would say, Houston, we have a problem. We don't have a GM. and that we just have our head coach as the GM. With the two guys there, if the coach is feeling a little bit pressure, but the GMs, they're separate, like this trade doesn't happen, if Houston had a GM, there's no way that at least a competent GM, there's no way that 2 first round picks would be shipped off for Laramie Tunsil. There is no way. But since that Bill O'Brien has all that control, he's feeling the heat. He's really dug his grave here. He has to win, and he can't just win a playoff game. I think if he doesn't get to the AFC Championship game and be competitive in it at the very least, I think he's gone. I think that's a very big possibility. So, Houston fans, really buckle in, man. This is gonna be boom or bust. This is prime Al Davis stuff we're talking about, But that's what I think it all means for Houston. So, do you think that this whole Houston not having a GM, do you think that's going to be something that continues as a trend, or do you think that's something that's going to kind of cut back a little bit, because it's a really interesting dynamic? And do you think a move like this helps or hurts that?
I think we're going to see this start to cut back just a little bit. Like you said, there's probably only one man who can effectively do that job, and that's Bill Belichick. Just a man who sleeps, eats, and just as soon as he wakes up, it's just all football, all Super Bowls pretty much. That's all the man does with Super Bowls.
Literally. And he tripped on Monday and he fell into a Super Bowl Lombardi trophy exactly. On Friday. So,
and with some of these other coaches, I mean, we're seeing a little bit with Bill O'Brien. You can't have them doing those two spots. You give him that much power and he's in control of his job a little bit more. He can start doing some things like that, which may hurt the team a little bit more and save his job, but that's not going to win you titles. That's not going to put the Lombardi trophy in your trophy case. That's not going to bring that back to the city of Houston. Mm-hmm. So I think we're going to start seeing his responsibilities cut down a little bit, and I don't see any other NFL team really copying this strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I agree with you there. The one thing that comes to my mind is the Oakland Raiders situation with John Gruden. When he first got hired, it was him and Reggie McKenzie, but Reggie McKenzie, we all kind of knew he wasn't. His power had really been curbed there, and a lot of it was given to John Gruden, and him having to basically run the entire draft and do all the trades and whatnot and just take care of all of that. I mean, I guess he had McKenzie do it, but it was really under John Gruden's direction. I think even after that year, they kind of realized that they're going to need a GM that John Gruden can work with. They got a guy that he respects, and Mike Mayock, and ever since then he's been able to do well for himself and really almost limit John Gruden, because there was a funny story that in the draft where this year the Raiders had a 2nd-round pick and they traded back twice. John Gruden wanted to pull the trigger on the corner they drafted, Trayvon Mullen, at the spot they were. And Mike Mayock, having him there saying, no, we can trade back. He's going to be there on the board. No. And, having that trust there and them trading back a few times and them drafting that corner, I think that's the kind of dynamic that's healthy, and I think teams recognize that. And I don't know how this thing in Houston is going to go for some success, in the long run. So, in short, I think the GM-coach relationship is very healthy, and I don't think it'll set a trend. I actually think it'll do the opposite of set a trend. So, yeah, I think it'll curb that trend. Yeah, perfect. So, is there anything else you want to add on Houston? Maybe just talk about them this year. Maybe the players with the lack of Jadeveon Clowney will do. Maybe the addition of, Laramie Tunsil will do.
Yeah, I think we talked about a lot of this already. This is a do or die year for the Houston Texans and for Bill O'Brien, like you were talking about earlier. I still think the defense will be fine. They lose a very, very big impact player in Jadeveon Clowney, but you still have J.J. Watt out there. Mm-hmm. If he's healthy, he's still, in my opinion, the most disruptive player in the NFL on defense. Mm-hmm. And that's just my opinion. I know there's other guys that you could argue there. And then you grab Laramie Tunsil, a man to protect your young quarterback. And Laramie Tunsil was one of the better offensive tackles this past year, and he's one of the better tackles coming into the league. And he's up there with some of the big names: David Bakhtiari, Taylor,
The
Lewin,
one, yeah.
Mitchell Schwartz over in Kansas City. He's up there with all of those guys, and I think that's going to give you the protection. That's going to give Deshaun the protection that he needs to stay healthy, stay back in the pocket, and let him throw the ball downfield to DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller,
Kenny Stills now.
Kenny Stills now, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know. To me, do you think this has the potential to just completely backfire in Houston's face? Like, do you think this team could just kind of come out flat because of this whole Jadeveon Clowney distraction? And, they brought in some good players, but, do you think this has the potential to just really blow up in Bill O'Brien's face? It feels like this to me. I don't know why.
I'm gonna have to. I don't think it'll blow up in their face. They lose an impact player in Jadeveon Clowney, but a lot of the guys that they brought in, a left tackle, and then Kenny Stills a wide receiver. I don't think we're gonna see a whole lot of backfiring happening there. Kenny Stills, we talked about that. He's probably gonna be the third or fourth wide receiver on that roster. He's basically a Will Fuller. If you have Will Fuller in there, you're not gonna throw Kenny Stills in there. They're probably gonna rotate reps and things like that. Maybe he's their fourth wide receiver. He goes out there when they're in those, forward wide receiver sets, empty backfield type of deals. Then Clowney and Tunsil, he's your left tackle, but I don't think that's going to be much of an impact to, where it can blow up their season, unless he lets a defensive end go by him and Deshaun Watson just gets drilled and his leg goes out, then... Yeah.
No, I think Deshaun Watson cannot absorb another 60 sacks this season.
Yeah.
That would be horrible. I also think Deshaun Watson, in a way, does it to himself with how much he holds the ball. I think he needs to learn how to do that. But I think this has the potential to blow up in Houston's face, and I can't tell you definitively why, but I just have this feeling. So, anyways, we're going to get on out of here. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out our channel, our page on Facebook, and you can subscribe to our channel on YouTube at Mark You Down for a Cup of Joe. So, this is Mark.
This is Joe.
And we're signing off.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.